Okay, we're going to continue with the four elements. We are up to Perek Daled Halacha Gimel. So now we're going to talk about the dissolution of matter into its original properties. V'chol hamechober me'arba yesodos elu hu nifrad b'sof. So um, the sum of the parts being that it equals the whole. So once something is no longer, so it ends up going back to its original state. Okay, that's what the Rambam uses the word hunifrad. It when it withers away. So each of the four elements um, will be separated and be left with. Yeshu nifrad la'achar yamim achadim. Sometimes this decomposition happens very quickly. The Yeshu nifrad la'achar shanim rabos. Sometimes it takes years, right? Very, very long time for something. But eventually, everything, everything withers away. V'chol shenitchaber mehen efshar shelo yiparid lehen. And everything that is combined. Remember how he said in the last previous halachas that some are a combination, some are two elements, some are three elements, some are four elements. So he says that once they get bunched together, it's impossible that they don't get separated back to the original state. Afilu hazahav v'ha'odem, and even gold and even odem, right? Odem should sound familiar. It's rubies. It's one of the jewels that is mentioned in the that's in the Torah. That's written. Excuse me. That's on the Choshen. So that also eventually everything goes back to its original form. V'yashuv miktsasol le'esh, u'miktsasol le'mayim, u'miktsasol le'ruach, u'miktsasol le'aretz. So when something withers away, they return back to their original element. A piece of this item becomes fire, a piece becomes water, a piece becomes wind, and a piece becomes earth. So I would just to do some fact checking on the Rambam. So there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that the Rambam has a couple of Gemaras on his side. Without getting into it, there's a Gemara in Ksuvas, Gemara in Bava Metzia, in Elu Metzias regarding finding objects. If you find a gold object, they don't want you touching it because when you use it, it could wither away. That's what the Gemara says on Daf Lamed. But according to ChatGPT, gold does not decompose under normal conditions. Gold is an element, meaning it's made of only one type of atom. Because of that, it can't be chemically broken down into simpler substances. It's also one of the least reactive metals. It doesn't tarnish, rust, or corrode. Obviously, that's why it's worth so much money. So there seems to be a little bit of machlokes, achronim, whether gold decomposes or not. But be that as it may, the Rambam does have a couple of Gemaras that talks about kalim that are made out of gold. So we'll leave it at that. Hoel v'chol hanifsad yipared liyasodos elu. So the Rambam asks an interesting question. So now that we're talking about the dust to dust as we say, right? So we all end up in the ground, and we all end up, as the pasuk says in Bereshis, ve'alafar tashuv. So it sounds like we're going to end up being afar, but we're not, which is really adama. But we have more than adama in us. We're made up of four elements inside. So if that's true, then what happened to the other three elements? The Rambam's asking a kasha. So he says, Lefi sharov binyano min ha'afar. Well, so the Rambam answers that don't get too excited about the question. It's just that most of our composition is in the afar category or the adama category. Again, I don't really want to fact check that because I don't think he's right. I think we're more water at the end of the day than we are Adama. It's my personal opinion. But anyways, v'lo kol hanifsad kisheyi pased miyad yachzor la'arba hayesodos. And the Rambam ends off by saying that it doesn't happen right away, miyad. Eli pased biyachzor ledavar acher, v'davar acher ledavar acher. V'sof advarim yachzor liyesodos. He says this is a long, drawn out process. Meaning when we decompose, we go into a different state, and that state turns into a different state, and that state turns into a different state, and then it will go back to its original basic four elements. So therefore, nimtzu kol hadvarim chozrim chalila. Right, this is what we call the galgal hachozer. So everything goes back to their original state. There's some cycle that is going on, right? This sounds like kol hanachalim hochim al hayam, right? There's some Koheles motif in this, as I don't know, maybe there's a little hint to evolution. I'm not going to touch that one though, but if you want to look into that, I think the Rambam is talking about evolution. Anyways, getting on to 5, halacha hey. Arba Yesodas ha'elu mishtanim zela zeh tamid b'chol yom u'b'chol sha'a. Miktsasan lo kol gufan. So now the Rambam's going to come up with a chiddush in this whole, obscure discussion, or I should say theoretical discussion, something we can't really see or feel, but nevertheless, he does say that these 4 elements are always changing. Right? There's always something, there's always a reaction in which one is changing into the state of the other. Every day, every hour, okay? Not, he says, not the entire guf, but only part of the guf. So Ketzad, let's think of an example. Miktsas ha'aretz ha'krovim min hamayim, mishtanes u'mispareres v'nasamayim. So if you think of a basic elementary example, if you picture, like, for example, the beach or the riverbank, right? So the earth over there, over time, right, changes, and eventually that'll be water also. Now, we know it's water, eventually be water, because cycles and because of, I don't want to say global warming, but, there's always constant, movement. So what is a lake today may not be a lake tomorrow, and vice versa, right? So that's why the Ram gives his first example, that water, that land by the water, right, can eventually become water. And if I have mayim that's next to wind, it becomes like it evaporates almost and becomes air, like what we would call steam, like when you boil water, right? It goes from liquid to gas, right? If I have a fire and it's wind driven, so that wind becomes subsumed in the fire. And the same thing also, if I have fire next to wind, I'm not too clear about this example. I understand the first case of the wind becoming into fire, but I'm not exactly sure how fire turns into wind, but okay. What if I have wind right next to the water? Then that wind, right, becomes water, because after all, right, wind is composed of water droplets, right? So the same thing is true with water that's next to land. Eventually, right, if the land subsumes it, then that water becomes the land. This is over time, over many, I'm not going to say the word millions, but we know that the world is millions of years old. Not exactly a contradiction, But this over time, and you look at the continents and you look at Pangea and all the studies that have been done, right? How the world has changed over the last, hundreds of millions of years. And, you know, this is very, very true. What's the water? I think the ocean is, I think, 74% or 76% of the world. So that wasn't always the case. So the Rambam over here alludes to it a little bit. Ve'ein kol hayesod mishtana ad sheyasa kol hamayim ruach or kol haruach. But it doesn't change until it's 100%, meaning you'll never have a 100% change. You will never, you'll have a portion, you'll have some earth becoming water, some water becoming earth, but you're not going to have one of the elements dominate 100%. It'll never be 100-0. You'll have a portion. You'll have only a small percentage change. Or some will go from ruach to eish, but only fractionally. And the same is true, right, between each pair of the four, right? You'll never have one 100% overtake the other one, but this will go on, but it will change, right? The chozros chalila la'olam, and they will go in this pattern that will go on forever. And that's, not evolution per se, the way we think of it, but just just the geology of this planet. All right, we'll stop here.